On January 19th of 1994, John Lennon was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for his amazing musical creations and was inducted as a solo artist into the performers category. There was no better man to give his induction speech than his good friend, former band partner, and the man he wrote so many songs with, Paul McCartney. Both Paul McCartney and John Lennon will go down in history for creating the band The Beatles in 1957 and going on to expand rock and roll love by destroying the top charts and claiming over 20 number one hits in just under 7 years. Paul McCartney gave his speech in Cleveland, Ohio, where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was held. This speech was meant to inform and entertain, but not for the audience. It was written as a letter to John Lennon, as Paul states early on. The way Paul gave the speech was by telling the late John stories of their past and all the great things that happened in their friendship and partnership. For example, Paul mentions how they formed the band by adding details like how they got their famous Beatles haircut, and how Paul introduced John to George Harrison, and then the three of them met Ringo Starr. Paul uses a lot of humor in these stories to help bring entertainment into the speech, although the audience seemed to be fully entertained just by hearing a first-hand account of the Beatles' history. The delivery of this speech was not top-notch because Paul did not follow a typical speech outline and did not have great eye contact or smoothness in his speech. But we must remember that to Paul, he was talking to his late good friend, not to an audience. So while the delivery in particular was very average and not spectacular, the emotion and words made up for it. The most significant quote from this speech comes towards the end when Paul is briefly talking about the band's breakup, and he says, quote, "After our business crap that we'd gone through, actually getting back together and communicating once again, and the joy as you told me how you were baking bread now, and how now you were playing with your little baby, Sean, that was great for me, because it gave me something to hold on to," unquote. This amazing and emotional quote from Paul really gave the audience an insight on their relationship, especially when at the time that the media was just continuously hating on them for breaking up. This quote also reminds the audience how famous people like John and Paul have emotions too, and sometimes they just miss their best friend and love hearing from them after a terrible time. In his speech, he used pretty simple words, nothing out of the ordinary, so there wasn't a word I didn't know, but he did bring up smoking Typhoon tea when him and John first started writing songs, and I thought that was pretty unordinary. The physical audience to Paul's speech were the people attending the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that year, which actually included Yoko Ono, John's wife. But many could argue that the true audience to his speech was John Lennon, since it was his induction speech, and Paul considered it as a letter to his friend. I personally really enjoyed this speech because it gave me a lot of insight into John and Paul's relationship throughout their years of knowing each other. And it also helped me realize that these two men shared a bond through music that is very unordinary, but very neat. It also warmed my heart to hear that they still talk to each other after the breakup, and that the media over-dramatized what actually happened. And in reality, they shared their unbreakable bond long after the band's breakup. This speech will go down in history for showing the love between two friends that helped make one of the most beloved bands in history.